There are moments in pop culture that feel like the ground shifting beneath your feet. Not the kind of shift you see coming, not the kind where the blogs give you a 2-day warning and the stands start bracing for impact. The kind that hits without warning, mid-scroll, mid-morning, in the middle of an otherwise ordinary day. The kind where you put your phone down and sit there for a second.
Yeah, I can challenge Jay-Z.
Yeah.
It's like, that boy's got too much skills for me, buddy. Nope.
You know, we
can rap.
We can flow so well, you know. We're gonna put out Destiny's Child album, Rapology, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, I can challenge Jay-Z.
Yeah.
It's like, that boy's got too much skills for me, buddy.
Genuinely trying to process whether what you just read is real. This is one of those moments. Because if what the internet is now piecing together is accurate, if the receipts, the rumors, the timelines, and the courtroom whispers are all pointing in the same direction, then what we are looking at isn't just celebrity gossip. It's the unraveling of one of the most carefully constructed images in music history. And it starts with a woman who has spent 30 years standing in someone else's shadow, smiling through things she should have screamed about, and quietly carrying a secret that would have detonated the entire industry if it ever got out. We're talking about Kelly Rowland. And we're talking about a child.
Insecurities about your singing voice. You even stated that you knew you weren't the vocal favorite of Destiny's Child. Is that something that, what made you second guess?
You know what? It's not that I was second guessing. I'm just aware. You know, some people are like, oh my gosh, it's stuck. They said it stuck with her. No, it didn't stick with me. You know, just sometimes you're aware that you're not everybody's favorite. And that's okay, I still got paid.
Okay.
Now, before anything else, let's be clear about what we know and what's being speculated. Because those two things matter here, and the line between them is going to be important as this story develops. What we know is that the rumors surrounding Jay-Z, Kelly Rowland, and Beyoncé have been circulating in underground fan spaces for years. What we know is that those rumors got louder after the elevator incident, louder again after Lemonade dropped, and louder still every time a new piece of the puzzle surfaced that didn't quite fit the official narrative. What's being discussed now, what the internet is treating as a potential bombshell, is the claim that court proceedings have brought this situation into legal territory. And when things go legal, they stop being theories. They become records. To understand why this hits so hard, you have to go back to the beginning. Not to 2014, not to the elevator, not even to Lemonade. You have to go back to Houston, Texas, in the early 1990s, when a group of teenage girls were finding their voices and learning that the music industry was going to test everything they had before it gave them anything in return. Beyoncé Knowles and Kelly Rowland grew up together in a way that most people can't fully appreciate from the outside. They weren't just bandmates. They weren't just childhood friends. Kelly essentially lived with the Knowles family for years. Tina Knowles helped raise her. She ate at their table, slept under their roof, and built the kind of bond with Beyoncé that goes beyond friendship into something closer to sisterhood. That's the foundation.
The typical stage mother who's there all of the time, interfering, meddling.
I hear the comment all the time, God, you are nothing like I heard you were. You are really a nice person.
That's the context you need to carry into everything else that follows. Because betrayal between strangers is painful. But betrayal between sisters, that's a different category of wound entirely. Destiny's Child didn't start at the top. There were early years of grinding, competitions where they lost, lineups that shifted, a first record deal that collapsed before it ever got off the ground. Matthew Knowles eventually stepped in as manager and pulled the group toward Columbia Records and the level of discipline and polish that would eventually make them legends. But the path to that point wasn't clean, and the dynamics inside the group were already complicated before the world ever learned their names. Specifically, Kelly complicated. Reports that surfaced over the years, from people close to the situation, from Kelly's own carefully worded interviews, and eventually from her own music, paint a picture of a young woman who was made to feel like a passenger in a vehicle she helped build. Matthew Knowles allegedly favored Beyoncé in ways that went beyond normal parental partiality. Kelly's contributions were minimized. Her image was controlled more restrictively than the others. Her voice, her ideas, her artistic identity, all of it filtered through a lens that consistently positioned her as the supporting player to Beyoncé's lead. And Kelly knew it. She said as much herself, not in anger, but in that quiet, self-aware way that hurts more than anger would. She acknowledged being aware that she wasn't everyone's vocal favorite in the group. She acknowledged accepting it, moving through it, still getting paid, as she put it. But there's a difference between accepting something and being at peace with it, and the resentment that built underneath that acceptance is the emotional engine driving everything that came after. Because resentment, when it runs long and deep enough, starts looking for exits. And exits in the world Destiny's Child moved through as their careers exploded came with consequences neither of those women could have fully predicted when they were still teenagers figuring out who they were. By the time Destiny's Child became a cultural institution, by the time Beyoncé and Kelly were individually growing into some of the most recognizable women in entertainment, Jay-Z was already operating at a level of power that few people in the industry could touch. He wasn't just a rapper by then. He wasn't just successful. He was an ecosystem. Labels, sports ownership, brand deals, global influence. He had constructed something that functioned more like an empire than a career. And Beyoncé, by marrying into that empire in 2008, became its queen. But here's what the public narrative always glossed over. Jay-Z's empire didn't appear overnight, and neither did his proximity to the women in Beyoncé's circle. The whispers about Jay-Z and Kelly Rowland didn't start with Lemonade. They started earlier, much earlier, in the kind of industry spaces where information circulates quietly, where the people who actually know things don't say them publicly because the power involved makes silence the smarter choice. But silence has a shelf life. And when Lemonade dropped in 2016, every fan who had been quietly connecting dots for years suddenly had a framework to put them in. Becky with the good hair.
It's your father. I really do. And if it's not, why you can't prove me wrong? Like it's not far as a proving me wrong thing. It's go to the courtroom and basically do what everybody else would have to do. Like it's not, you don't have to prove me wrong. I just want the truth. Honestly, I can take a no. I can take, if I'm embarrassed at the end of the day, I can take that. I really can. I've been through a lot. I've seen a lot. I can take me being embarrassed. Like just can't take nobody not saying nothing. Like, you know, it's not fair.
Those 4 words sent the internet into a spiral that lasted years. Because Beyoncé, who is meticulous about every single word in her art, who doesn't include a syllable by accident, chose to describe her husband's alleged affair partner with a phrase specific enough to narrow the field, but just vague enough to keep the audience guessing. Rita Ora's name came up. Rachel Roy's name came up. But the one name that kept resurfacing, the one that the most persistent theories kept landing on, was Kelly Rowland. And the reasons people kept going back to Kelly weren't based on nothing. They were based on timing, on proximity, on things Kelly herself said in her music that sounded less like fictional storytelling and more like confession. Dirty Laundry. If you've never listened to that track with full attention, you should. Because Kelly Rowland, in 2013, 3 years before Lemonade, released a song where she talked about being involved with a man she couldn't publicly acknowledge, a man whose identity she buried under careful phrasing, a relationship she described as toxic, consuming, and ultimately damaging to the most important bond in her life. Fans went looking for which ex-boyfriend she was describing. Every name that came up was eventually denied or didn't fit.
I was 7. My mom had to sit down with me. I guess she thought I was old enough to know now, and she been saying Sean Carter, that's what she was calling me first before she was calling it Daisy. And I really didn't know who that was because I was young and, you know, had my little brother and I really wasn't worrying about it. She was saying it a lot, but I really just was going along with the person. I was just seeing like the person I looked at who was taking care of me at that time. I really wasn't really trying to understand what my mom was talking about, but she constantly put it in my head like, son, that's...
And the theory that settled in, the one that refused to leave, was that the man she was singing about was never going to be found in her public dating history because he was never supposed to be hers in the first place. When the elevator footage went public in 2014, the world focused on the wrong things. Everyone fixated on Solange swinging. Everyone analyzed the body language, the security guard, Jay-Z's composure, Beyoncé standing still. The memes ran for months. But the question that should have been front and center, the one that got swept away in the spectacle, was why, not in a general sense. Not the vague, he must have done something interpretation that the Carter camp eventually tried to neutralize with a coordinated statement about family disagreements. Why specifically was Solange at that level of rage? The theory that has gained the most traction, not from gossip blogs, but from people who claim to have insight into the actual situation, is that Solange had just learned something that night. Not about a random model or a faceless side piece. Something that involved Kelly. Something that, if true, wouldn't just be infidelity. It would be a fundamental violation of the sisterhood that the Knowles family had extended to Kelly Rowland for decades. And Solange, who has always been Beyoncé's most ferocious protector, couldn't sit with that information quietly. Beyoncé could. Beyoncé is trained for that kind of stillness. She's built a career on being able to hold pain in a way that looks like composure until she's ready to transform it into art. So she stood in that elevator and she watched. And 2 years later, she released Lemonade. And the whole world finally understood what she had been carrying. But what Lemonade didn't resolve, what it actually deepened, was the identity question. because Beyoncé was specific enough to make it clear this was real, but never specific enough to name anyone. And that deliberate ambiguity has kept the theory alive in a way that a direct accusation never would have, because an accusation can be denied. But a question that stays open, that follows people forever. Now let's talk about Titan. Kelly Rowland married Tim Weatherspoon in 2014, the same year the elevator incident became public, the same year the industry was quietly processing whatever had actually happened between those four walls. She and Tim welcomed their son, Titan Jewel Weatherspoon, that same year. And from the moment photos of Titan began circulating publicly, a corner of the internet started saying the same thing in the same breath. That baby looks like Jay-Z. Now, facial resemblance theories are not evidence of anything. Children can look like a lot of people. Genes are complicated, and fan speculation based on photos is not the same as paternity confirmation. But the reason this particular observation kept gaining traction wasn't just about the photos. It was about the timing. It was about the elevator. It was about dirty laundry. It was about every thread that, when you pulled them individually, felt like coincidence. But when you laid them next to each other, started forming a pattern with a very specific shape. And patterns matter, especially when the people at the center of them keep choosing silence over clarification. Jay-Z has a complicated relationship with paternity questions, because Kelly and Titan aren't the only names attached to this particular shadow. Satterthwaite has been pursuing answers for years, publicly, painfully, and with a level of emotional transparency that made it impossible for anyone paying attention to dismiss him as just another clout chaser. Rymir's story starts in Philadelphia in 1992. His mother, Wanda, was introduced to a man going by Rock at the time, who would later be known to the world as Jay-Z. Wanda was reportedly 16 years old. Jay was 22. They were introduced at a restaurant. They spent time together. And according to Wanda's account in court documents filed years later, she fell pregnant after a contraceptive failure. When she tried to reach Jay-Z after he rose to fame, she was ignored. When she pursued legal channels to establish paternity and get her son the acknowledgement she believed he deserved, she was blocked at every turn. Wanda passed away from heart failure in 2019 at just 43 years old. She never got the answer she spent her adult life fighting for. Rymir kept fighting after she was gone. His godmother, Lily, stepped in and continued pushing for answers, for acknowledgement, for something, even just a conversation. And what Lily described about the experience was telling. She said Jay-Z's people initially made contact. There was a period where it felt like something was finally going to happen, like the right thing was going to be done, quietly, without the courts having to force it. They even discussed Rymir's musical talent and whether there might be a place for him on Jay's label eventually. And then the lawyers changed, and the tone changed, and everything went cold. Lily's reading of that pivot was direct. She believed the legal team realized that acknowledging Rymir meant acknowledging a relationship with a 16-year-old. And that acknowledgement carried implications that went far beyond a paternity test. Now layer that context onto the Kelly situation, because what made the Rymir story feel connected to the Kelly theory wasn't just that both involved Jay-Z and hidden children, it was that both involved the same pattern of powerful men using institutional resources to keep certain truths from reaching daylight. Legal maneuvering, strategic silence, carefully managed distance between the public image and the private reality. And when you're watching that pattern operate across multiple situations simultaneously, it stops looking like coincidence. It starts looking like infrastructure. Jay-Z has navigated scandal before. The side piece rumors, the Foxy Brown allegations, the reports of women kept on informal payrolls in different cities, none of it has ever fully stuck to him in a way that meaningfully damaged the empire. Part of that is power. Part of it is legal resources. Part of it is that Beyoncé, by staying, has functioned as the most powerful PR shield in entertainment history. Because every time someone asks a hard question about Jay-Z, the answer that shuts it down fastest is, well, Beyoncé is still there. And Beyoncé staying has always been interpreted as Beyoncé vouching. But what happens when that calculus changes? What happens when the question isn't about a stranger, about a model, a rapper, a random woman from a city Jay passed through, but about someone who ate at Beyoncé's family table, someone whose career was shaped in the same rooms as hers, someone who knew every secret, every sacrifice, every moment behind the curtain that never made it into the public story? What happens when Becky isn't a stranger? That's the question that Lemonade planted. And that's the question that is now, years later, threatening to get an answer through channels that neither Jay-Z nor Kelly Rowland can control. Because courtrooms don't care about image management. They care about evidence. Here's where the narrative shifts from speculation to something heavier. Because there's a version of this story that stayed underground forever, that lived in fan forums and gossip threads and never climbed out into the light. And then there's the version we might actually be watching unfold right now. The version where the legal system becomes the mechanism that forces what years of public pressure couldn't. The claim circulating now, the one that has the internet holding its breath, is that court proceedings have brought the Kelly Rowland and Jay-Z situation into documented territory. That what was once rumor has entered a space where it has to be addressed with evidence rather than deflected with press statements. And if that's true, then Beyoncé isn't just processing this as a wife dealing with a husband's history. She's processing it as a woman who may be facing confirmation of something she has suspected, carried, and transformed into art, but never had to confront as legal fact. That distinction matters enormously. There is a specific kind of pain that comes from suspecting something. You carry it, you manage it, you find ways to live alongside it without letting it define you. Beyoncé has demonstrated that capacity in a way the world has watched in real time. She alchemized her pain into lemonade. She turned devastation into cultural legacy. She made something that generations of women found themselves inside of, because she expressed grief and betrayal and resilience with a precision that felt universal. But suspicion and confirmation are two entirely different weights. And if the confirmation is coming through a courtroom, if it's coming with documents and timelines and biological evidence that removes every layer of deniability, then what Beyoncé is dealing with right now isn't the same thing she navigated in 2016. This is different. And the way it reportedly hit her is consistent with that difference. Because the image that people are connecting to the emotional language around this moment is of a woman who has held it together through everything. Through the rumors, through Solange's rage, through the elevator footage, through years of speculation about Becky's identity, finally encountering something she can't manage with composure. Something that breaks through whatever wall of discipline and control she spent decades constructing. And for Beyoncé, who famously never lets the world see her crack, that image alone tells you how serious this is. Now let's talk about what this means for Kelly Rowland. Because in this scenario, Kelly isn't just a supporting character in someone else's story. She's at the center of something that has been quietly destroying her most important relationship for years, possibly without her ever fully intending for it to go this far. The portrait of Kelly that emerges from the full scope of this story isn't a villain. It's someone who was shaped by years of feeling minimized, overlooked, and made to feel like she came second in every room she and Beyoncé shared. That resentment didn't come from nowhere. It was manufactured in real time, by real decisions made by people who should have treated her better. Matthew Knowles, by most accounts, did Kelly Rowland a genuine injustice in those early Destiny's Child years. And Beyoncé, young, ambitious, shaped by her father's partiality, didn't always push back the way a true sister would have. So if Kelly found something in Jay-Z that felt like being chosen, like being seen as the main character instead of the understudy, then the psychology of that isn't difficult to understand. It doesn't make it right. It doesn't make the betrayal of Beyoncé less severe, but it makes it human. It makes it the kind of thing that happens when people who are hurting make decisions that compound the hurt in ways they don't fully see until the damage is already done. The question of what happens to that friendship now, to the relationship between Beyoncé and Kelly that survived group breakups and solo career competition and decades of public scrutiny, is the question that nobody has an answer to. And it might be the most heartbreaking thread in this entire story, because if the court confirms what the internet has been theorizing for years, then Kelly Rowland isn't just someone who had an affair with Beyoncé's husband. She's someone who had his child. She's someone who, intentionally or not, created a permanent connection between Jay-Z and herself that cannot be managed away with a press statement or dissolved by time. That child, Titan, who is now a real child with a real life and no say in any of the circumstances surrounding his birth, becomes the living evidence of everything that was supposed to stay hidden. And children have a way of making permanent what adults want to keep temporary. For Jay-Z, the exposure here is multi-layered in a way that most of his previous scandals weren't. This isn't about infidelity in the abstract. This is about a specific woman, one of the closest people to his wife, and a specific child whose existence, if the timeline holds up legally, raises questions that go beyond adultery into territory involving Rymir, involving Wanda, involving a pattern of choices Jay-Z made across decades that he has never been fully forced to account for publicly. The empire doesn't fall because of one story, but empires erode, and each layer that gets stripped away, each courtroom document, each confirmed timeline, each person who decides that their silence has protected someone else for long enough, makes the next layer harder to maintain. Jay-Z has spent his career being Teflon. Allegations slide off, scandals get absorbed. The power structure around him is designed to ensure that the narrative he controls is the one that survives. But the people who built that structure, the lawyers, the insiders, the people with first-hand knowledge, those relationships are built on trust and reciprocity. And when someone feels like the trust only runs one direction, the architecture gets fragile. Lily said it about Rymir's situation. The help that seemed to be coming suddenly disappeared when the legal stakes became clear. That's not how you treat someone you genuinely care about. That's how you manage a liability. And when the people closest to a secret start feeling like liabilities being managed rather than people being protected, they start making different choices about what they keep quiet, which is how secrets this size eventually reach courtrooms. What we are watching, if this unfolds the way the current wave of information suggests it might, is the slow collapse of one of entertainment's most durable mythologies. The mythology that the Carters are untouchable, that their image is too well constructed to crack, that every piece of chaos that has orbited their world has been successfully contained before it could do permanent damage. Because up until now, that mythology has held. The elevator got contained. Lemonade was reframed as art rather than evidence. The Rymir situation stayed in the legal weeds where most of the public doesn't follow. And Kelly Rowland, whoever she truly is in this story, has kept her mouth shut with a discipline that almost rivals Beyoncé's own. But courts don't need your cooperation. They compel it. And if what's been filed, what's been documented, what's been entered into the kind of record that doesn't disappear with a strategically timed press release is as significant as the chatter suggests, then the containment era might finally be over. The thing about Beyoncé that people sometimes forget in the middle of all the iconography and the stadium performances and the cultural institution of it all is that she is a woman who loved someone, built a life with them, and has spent years making peace with things that most people would not have survived publicly. She has shown the world what it looks like to hold power and pain simultaneously, to be both the queen and the one who got hurt. And if she's crying now, if what's reportedly happening in her world right now is breaking through the composure that has held for this long, then the least the rest of us can do is acknowledge what that actually means. It means the truth, in whatever form it takes, is heavier than the art could fully carry. It means the woman behind the icon is absorbing something real, something that can't be turned into a visual album, something that has to simply be felt. Nobody wins in this story, not Beyoncé, carrying the weight of a betrayal that came from the person she trusted most after family, not Kelly, who may have spent years living inside a secret that was always going to eventually be too large to contain, not Titan, who didn't choose any of this and deserves better than to grow up as a punchline or a plot point in someone else's drama, not Rymir, who has been asking for basic acknowledgement for decades and has been answered with silence and legal maneuvering, and not even Jay-Z, whose choices, made across years, across cities, across relationships, are now converging in a courtroom in a way that no amount of institutional power is going to fully neutralize. This is what happens when powerful people make choices they believe their power will protect them from forever. Sometimes forever ends. The internet is going to keep digging. The legal process, if it moves the way these things move, is going to keep producing information. And the people in the middle of this, real human beings with real lives attached to the outcome, are going to keep having to navigate something that nobody in their circle prepared them for. So where do you land on this? Do you think the court confirmation changes everything? Or do you think the Carter machine is powerful enough to absorb even this? And what about Kelly? Do you see someone who made choices out of resentment and insecurity? Or do you see someone who was shaped by years of being overlooked into a situation she couldn't find her way out of? And Beyoncé, after everything she's already survived in this marriage, what does confirmation mean for where she goes from here? Drop your honest thoughts in the comments. This is the kind of conversation that deserves more than hot takes. Because the layers here are real, the people are real, and the fallout is going to be real too. If you've been following these breakdowns that go past the surface and into the actual human story underneath, hit that like button and subscribe. Because we are nowhere near the end of this one, eh? I'll catch you on the next one.